Hello and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we continue our reading from The View from the Stars by Walter M. Miller Jr., continuing with Blood Bank. A sharp whack across the soles of his boots brought him painfully awake. Get your feet off the controls, snapped an angry voice. Roki winced and blinked at a narrow, frowning face with a cigar clenched in its teeth. And get out of that chair, the face growled around its cigar. His feet stung with pain. He hissed a snarl and bounded to his feet. Grabbing a handful of the intruder's shirt front, he aimed a punch at the cigar, then stayed the fist in midair. Something felt wrong about the shirt. Aghast, he realized there was a woman inside it. He let go and reddened. I I thought you were the pilot. She eyed him contemptuously as she tucked in her shirt. I am, Doc. She tossed her hat on the navigation desk, revealing a close-cropped head of dark hair. She removed the cigar from her face, neatly pinched out the fire, and filed the butt in the pocket of her dungarees for a rainy day. She had a nice mouth with the cigar gone, but it was tight with anger. Stay out of my seat, she told him crisply, and out of my hair. Let's get that straight before we start. This, this is your tub? He gasped. She stalked to a panel and began punching settings into the courser. That's right, I'm Daleth Shipping Incorporated. Any comments? You expect this wreck to make it to Sol, he growled. She snapped him a sharp, green-eyed glance. Well, listen to the free ride. Make your complaints to the colonel, fellow. I don't expect anything except my pay. I'm willing to chance it. Why shouldn't you? The existence of a fool is not necessarily a proof of the existence of two fools, he said sourly. If you don't like it, go elsewhere. She straightened and swept him up with a clinical glance. But as I understand it, you can't be too particular. He frowned. Are you planning to make that your business? You're nothing to me, fellow. I don't care who I haul as long as it's legal. Now, do you want to ride or don't you? He nodded curtly and stalked back to find quarters. Stay out of my cabin, she bellowed after him. Roki grunted disgustedly. The pilot was typical of Daleth civilization. It was still a rough, uncouth planet with a thinly scattered population, a wild frontier, and growing pains. The girl was the product of a wildly expanding, tough-fisted culture with little respect for authority. It occurred to him immediately that she might be thinking of selling him to the Solarian officials as the man who blasted the Mercy ship. Prepare to lift off, came the voice of the intercom, 2 minutes before blastoff. Roki suppressed an urge to scramble out of the ship and call the whole thing off. The rockets belched, coughed, and then hissed faintly, idling in wait for a command. Roki stretched out on his bunk, for some of these older ships were rather rough on blastoff. The hiss became a thunder, and the idiot moved skyward, first slowly, then with a spurt of speed. When it cleared the atmosphere, there was a sudden lurch as it shed the now empty booster burners. There was a moment of dead silence as the ship hovered without power. Then the faint shriek of the ion streams came to his ears as the ion drive became useful in the vacuum of space. He glanced out the port to watch the faint streak of luminescence focus into a slender needle of high-speed particles, pushing the idiot ever higher in a rush of acceleration. He punched the intercom button. Not bad for a Delethian, he said admiringly. Keep your opinions to yourself, growled Daleth Incorporated. The penetration to higher sea levels came without subjective sensation. Roki knew it was happening when the purr from the reactor room went deep-throated and when the cabin lights went dimmer. He stared calmly out the port, for the phenomenon of penetration never ceased to thrill him. The transition to high sea began as a blue shift in the starlight. Distant, dull red stars came slowly brighter, whiter, until they burned like myriad welding arcs in the black vault. not identical with the stars of the home continuum, but rather projections of the same star masses at gradually higher sea levels of five space, where the velocity of light was gradually increasing as the idiot climbed higher in the Seath component. At last, he had to close the port, for the starlight was becoming unbearable as its wavelength moved into the ultraviolet and the X ray bands. He watched on a fluorescent viewing screen. The projective star masses were flaring into supernovae, and the changing continuums seemed to be collapsing toward the ship in a blue shift of the cosmos. As the radiant energy increased, the cabin became warmer, and the pilot set up a partial radiation screen. At last, the penetration stopped. Roki punched the intercom again. What level are we on, Daleth? 90,000, she replied curtly. Roki made a wry mouth. She had pushed it up to the red line without a blink. It was okay if the radiation screens held out. If they failed to hold, the ship would be blistered into a drifting dust cloud. Want me to navigate for you? He called. I'm capable of handling my own ship, she barked. I'm aware of that, but I have nothing else to do. You might as well put me to work. She paused, then softened a little. Okay, come on forward. She swung around in her chair as he entered the cabin, and for the first time he noticed that despite the close cropped hair and the dungarees and the cigar smoking, she was quite a handsome girl. Handsome, proud, and highly capable. Daleth, the frontier planet, bred a healthy, if somewhat unscrupulous species. The sea maps are in that case, she said, jerking her thumb toward the filing cabinet. Work out a course for maximum radiant thrust. Roki frowned. Why not a least time course? She shook her head. My reactors aren't too efficient. We need all the boost we can get from external energy. Otherwise, we'll have to dive back down for fuel. Worse and worse, Roki thought as he dragged out the sea maps. Flying this boat to Sol would have been a feat of daring 2 centuries ago. Now, in an age of finer ships, it was a feat of idiocy. Half an hour later, he handed her a course plan that would allow the idiot to derive about half of its thrust from the variations in radiation pressure from the roaring inferno of the high-level cosmos. She looked it over without change of expression, then glanced at him curiously after noting the time. You're pretty quick, she said. Thank you. You're hardly stupid. Why did you pull such a stupid boner? Roki stiffened. I thought you planned to regard that as none of your business. She shrugged and began punching course settings into the courser. Sorry, I forgot. Still angry, he said, I don't regard it as a boner. I'd do it again. She shrugged again and pretended a lack of interest. Space smuggling could be the death of the galaxy, he went on. That's been proven. 1 billion people once died on Tau 2 because somebody smuggled in a load of non-Tauian animals for house pets. I only did what history has proven best. I'm trying to mind my own business, she growled, eyeing him sourly. Roki fell silent and watched her reshape the radiation screen to catch a maximum of force from the flare of energy that blazed behind them. Roki was not sure that he wanted her to mind her own business. They would have to bear each other's presence for several months, and it would be nice to know how things stood. So you think it was a stupid boner, he continued at last. So does everyone else. It hasn't been very pleasant. She snorted scornfully as she worked. Where I come from, we don't condemn fools. We don't need to. They just don't live very long, not on Daleth. And am I a fool by your code? How should I know? If you live to a ripe old age and get what you want, you probably aren't a fool. And that, thought Roki, was the Dalethian golden rule. If the universe lets you live, then you're doing all right. And there was truth in it, perhaps. Man was born with only one right, the right to a chance at proving his fitness. And that right was the foundation of every culture, even though most civilized worlds tried to define fitness in terms of cultural values. Where life was rough, it was rated in terms of survival. I really don't mind talking about it, he said with some embarrassment. I have nothing to hide. That's nice. Do you have a name other than your firm name? As far as you're concerned, I'm Daleth Incorporated. She gave him a suspicious look that lingered a while and became contemplative. There's only one thing I'm curious about. Why are you going to Saul? He smiled wryly. If I told a Delethian that, she would indeed think me a fool. Slowly the girl nodded. I see. I know of Kofian ethics. If an officer's blunder results in someone's death, he either proves that it was not a blunder or he cuts his throat. Ceremonially, I believe. Will you do that? Roki shrugged. He had been away from Kof a long time. He didn't know. A stupid custom, she said. It manages to drain off the fools, doesn't it? It's better than having society try them and execute them forcibly for their crimes. On Kof, a man doesn't need to be afraid of society. He needs only to be afraid of his own weakness. Society's function is to protect individuals against unfortunate accidents, but not against their own blunders. And when a man blunders, Kof simply excludes him from the protectorate. As an outcast, he sacrifices himself. It's not too bad a system. You can have it, Delethian. Yeah, you have no personal anger against what I did? She frowned at him contemptuously. I judge no one. I judge no one unless I'm personally involved. Why are you worried about what others think? In our more highly developed society, he said stiffly, a man inevitably grows a set of thinking habits called conscience. Oh, yeah, her dull tone indicated a complete lack of interest. Again, Roki wondered if she would think of making a quick bit of cash by informing Solarian officials of his identity. He began a mental search for a plan to avoid such possible treachery. They ate and slept by the ship's clock. On the 10th day, Roki noticed a deviation in the readings of the radiation screen instruments. The shape of the screen shell was gradually trying to drift toward minimum torsion and assume a spherical shape. He pointed it out to Daleth, and she quickly made the necessary readjustments. But the output of the reactors crept a notch higher as a result of the added strain. Roki wore an apprehensive frown as the flight progressed. 2 days later, the screen began creeping again. Once more, the additional power was applied, and the reactor output needle hung in the yellow band of warning. The field generators were groaning and shivering with threatening overload. Roki worked furiously to locate the trouble, and at last he found it. He returned to the control cabin in a cold fury. Did you have this ship pre-flighted before blast off? He demanded. Her mouth fluttered with amusement as she watched his anger. Certainly, Commander. He flushed a little at the worthless title. May I see the papers? For a moment she hesitated, then fumbled in her pocket and displayed a folded pink paper. Pink, he roared. You had no business taking off. Haughtily, she read him the first line of the pre-flight report. Base personnel disclaim any responsibility for accidents resulting from the flight of Daleth ship. It doesn't say I can't take off. I'll see you banned from space, he growled. She gave him a look that reminded him of his current status. It was a tolerant, amused stare. What's wrong, Commander? The synchronizers are out, that's all, he fumed. Screen's getting farther and farther from resonance. So? So it'll overload, get worse, and the screen will break down. You'll have to drop back down out of the C component and get it repaired. She shook her head. We'll chance it like it is. I've always wanted to find out how much overload the reactors will take. Roki choked. There wasn't a chance of making it. Are you a graduate space engineer? He asked. No. Then you'd better take one's advice. Yours? Yes. No, we're going on. Suppose I refuse to let you. She whirled quickly, eyes flashing. I'm in command of the ship. I'm also armed. I suggest you return to your quarters, passenger. Roki sized up the situation, measuring the determination in the girl's eyes, and decided that there was only one thing to do. He shrugged and looked away as if admitting her authority. She glared at him for a moment, but did not press her demand that he leave the control room. As soon as she glanced back at the instruments, Roki patted his rough knuckles with a handkerchief, selected a target at the back of her short crop of dark hair, and removed her objections with a short chopping blow to the head. Sorry, friend, he murmured as he lifted her limp body out of the seat. He carried her to her quarters and placed her on the bunk. After removing a small needle gun from her pocket, he left a box of headache tablets in easy reach, locked her inside, and went back to the controls. His fist was numb and he felt like a heel, but there was no use arguing with a Delethian. Clubbing her to sleep was the only way to avoid bloodier mayhem in which she might have emerged the victor until the screens gave way. The power indication was threateningly high as Roki activated the C drive and began piloting the ship downward through the fifth component. But with proper adjustments, he made the process analogous to freefall, and the power reading fell off slowly. A glance at the C maps told him that the idiot would emerge far beyond the limits of the 60-star cluster. When it re-entered the continuum, it would be in the general volume of space controlled by another interstellar organization called the Vigoran Federation. He knew little of its culture, but certainly it should have facilities for repairing a set of screen synchronizers. He looked up its capital planet and began jetting toward it while the ship drifted downward in C. As he reached lower energy levels, he cut out the screen altogether and went to look in on Daleth Incorporated, who had made no sound for 2 hours. He was surprised to see her awake and sitting up on the bunk. She gave him a cold and deadly stare, but displayed no rage. I should have known better than to turn my back on you. Sorry, you were going to save it. Where are we? Coming in on Trigor 3. I'll have you jailed on Trigor 3 then. He nodded. You could do that, but then you might have trouble collecting my fare from Beth. That's all right. Suit yourself. I'd rather be jailed on your trumped up charges than be a wisp of gas at 90,000 C. Trumped up? Sure, the pink pre-flight. Any court will say that whatever happened was your own fault. You lose your authority if you fly pink unless your crew signs a release. You a lawyer? I've had a few courses in space law, but if you don't believe me, check with the Interfed service on Trigor 3. I will. How about opening the door? I want out. Behave. She paused, then, my promises wouldn't mean anything, Roki. I don't share your system of ethics. He watched her cool green eyes for a moment, then chuckled. In a sense, you do, or you wouldn't have said. He unlocked the cabin and released her, not trusting her, but realizing that the synchronizers were so bad by now that she couldn't attempt to go on without repairs. She would have no motive for turning on him, except anger, perhaps. My gun, she said. Again, Roki hesitated. Then, smiling faintly, he handed it to her. She took the weapon, sniffed scornfully, and cocked it. Turn around, fool, she barked. Roki folded his arms across his chest and remained facing her. Go to the devil, he said quietly. Her fingers whitened on the trigger. Still, the Kofian failed to flinch, lose his smile, or move. Daleth Incorporated arched her eyebrows, uncocked the pistol, and returned it to her belt. Then she patted his cheek and chuckled nastily. Just watch yourself, Commander. I don't like you. And he noticed as she turned away that she had a bump on her head to prove it. He wondered how much such a bump would cost him before it was over. Treachery on salt, perhaps. And we will follow this uneven flight further next time.